A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. This is Diaspora Dispatches. We get to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. I trust that your day is going on well. It is the 8th of May 2023. About 6 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi. We start from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the country is observing a day of national mourning in memory of the dead and missing of Bushushu in Kalehe territory in South Kivu. Following deadly floods and landslides, according to officials, about 400 bodies have been found. Relatives of the victims are devastated. Several villages have been submerged, many houses washed away, fields devastated when rivers left their beds under the effect of heavy rains. At the end of Friday's Council of Ministers, Kinshasa announced the sending of a government mission to support the provincial government in managing this disaster. Doctors Without Borders MSF also said it had sent an emergency team to the area on Saturday. The disaster came 2 days after floods killed at least 131 people and destroyed thousands of homes in neighboring Rwanda. On the spot, the victims lack everything, according to Mr. Bakenga. The head of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, stressed on Saturday during a visit to Burundi that it was a new illustration of an acceleration of climate change and its dramatic consequences for countries that are not involved in global warming of the planet. Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko says he will no longer obey court summons or cooperate with the justice authorities unless his security is guaranteed. Mr. Sonko said he had been subject to 5 court summons, which he had obeyed except one on legal grounds, despite propaganda that he was not respecting the institution. He said he had been the subject of so much fierceness and so much brutality, an attempt almost at physical liquidation after being summoned by the court. He was appearing to refer to his March claim of assassination attempt when police allegedly sprayed a toxic liquid on him during a forced transfer to Dakar court. Mr. Sonko is facing 2 court cases that may bar him from contesting the presidency in next year's election. He is facing trial later this month for rape and death threats over a complaint filed by an employee of a beauty salon. He denies the charges, saying they were politically driven. He was in March found guilty of defaming the tourism minister and was appealed against the judgment and has appealed against the judgment. The hearing on that appeal was set to begin on Monday. And Saudi Arabia says it expects talks which began in Jeddah on Saturday between Sudan's warring military factions that will reach an effective ceasefire. In the first confirmation that the meeting had started, the Saudi Foreign Ministry said both sides recognized the need to ease the suffering of the Sudanese people. It said, as well as stopping the fighting, the aim was to ensure the delivery of relief supplies and the restoration of essential services. There's been no comment from the Sudanese army or its rival from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces on the talks. The meeting in Jeddah are the first since the fighting broke out more than 3 weeks ago. And then we head over to Uganda. Excuse me. Uganda's security forces say they have discovered explosive intended for use during planned anti-government protests. In the capital, Kampala, an activist group, Uganda Freedom Activists, has called for nationwide protest on Monday against corruption and economic hardships in the country. Defense spokesperson Brigadier Felix Kalu Yinje in a tweet said the explosives were found in Nabweru on the road to Kazo in central Wakiso district. 4 people were arrested for alleged possession of improvised explosive devices, the army said. Police warned the activists against organizing the protest, terming them unlawful. The activists have, however, vowed to go on with the protest, describing Brigadier Kulayinjes as a liar. United Nations humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths arrived in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on Sunday for talks aiming for a ceasefire between Sudan's warring military factions. As spokesperson has said, Mr. Griffiths is in Jeddah to engage in humanitarian issues related to Sudan. United Nations spokesperson Eric Kaneko said Representatives from Sudan's warring armies are in Saudi Arabia for their first face-to-face negotiations. The pre-negotiation talks between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces (RSF) started on Saturday in Jeddah. They are sponsored by the US and Saudi Arabia. Several ceasefires have broken down since the fighting began weeks ago. Hundreds of people have been killed and nearly 450,000 civilians displaced since the fighting began. The Ethiopian government has repatriated a journalist who was arrested in Djibouti in collaboration with Djiboutian authorities and Interpol. The state television ETV has reported Gobeze Sise, the owner and founder of the internet-based media Amara Voice, was wanted for terrorism acts to subvert the constitutional order in Amara region. Mr. Gobeza was in a list of wanted people. The federal government also accused him of plotting to subvert the constitutional order in Amara. He was arrested and charged with multiple criminal charges last September before being released on bail in November. Detention of journalists has been on the rise in Ethiopia in the recent months. Sorry, and the story that I've been updating you about from the UK, remember, regarding that senator from Nigeria, and that ruling was supposed to be made on Friday. Well, it was made. And the UK court on Friday jailed Nigeria's former deputy Senate president for 9 years and 8 months following his landmark conviction for plotting to harvest a man's kidney for his sick daughter. In the first UK case of its kind, Judge Jeremy Johnson handed Ike Ekwerimadu, who is 60 years old, the prison sentence for his part in a despicable trade that took advantage of a poverty, misery, and desperation of vulnerable people. Also convicted was Ekwerimadu's wife, Beatrice, who is 56 years old, and Obina Obeta, who's 50, a doctor who acted as a middleman in the plot. Beatrice Ekwerimadu was jailed for 4 years and 6 months, and Mr. Obeta for 10 years. The Ekwerimadu's daughter, Sonia, who's 25, had shed tears back in March as she was cleared of the same charge after jurors deliberated for nearly 14 hours. On Friday, she waved to her parents as they were led out of court. Neither of them showed any emotion as they were sentenced. It is legal to donate a kidney in Britain, but not for financial or material reward. It was the first time organ harvesting conspiracy charges had been brought under the UK's 2015 Modern Slavery Act. The maximum sentence under the legislation is life imprisonment. Director Inspector Esther Richardson from the Metropolitan Police Modern Slavery and Exploitation Command called it a landmark conviction and thanked the victim for his bravery in coming forward. During the weeks-long trial, the anonymous 21-year-old victim from Lagos testified that Ekwerimadus had flown him to Britain to harvest his kidney. The kidney was said to be intended for Sonia, who remains on dialysis with a renal condition, in return for £7,000. That is equivalent to $8,800 US. The man said he had been recruited by a doctor working for the politician and had thought he was coming to the UK for work. The court was told he only realized it was for a kidney transplant when he was taken to London's Royal Free Hospital last year. He fled and slept on the streets for 3 days after doctors were told he would not be a suitable donor following preliminary test. He eventually walked into a police station last May and said he was looking for someone to save his life. Lawyers for the 4 accused and insisted he was acting intrusically, and Ike Ekwerimadu told jurors that he feared he was being scammed. Ekwerimadu has represented the Enugu West constituency in southeast Nigeria for the opposition People's Democratic Party (PDP) since 2003. Leaders in Nigeria's parliament last week appealed to the London court for clemency, arguing Ekwerimadu was a first-time offender who had made valuable contributions to politics in West Africa. He did not contest Nigeria's recent National Assembly elections, as he was in custody before and during the trial. The trial judge agreed with prosecutors that he could try to flee the UK. His wife and daughter had been out on conditional bail. And we will end from where we started. not really where we started, but the latest from Sudan. Sudanese military fighter jets are continuing with airstrikes in the capital, Khartoum, and the adjacent cities of Bahri and Omdurman, despite ceasefire talks taking place in Saudi Arabia. Ground battles are also taking place between the army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, in two areas in the central of Bahri, Shambat and Al-Fiyah. The fighting in Shambat is near a huge base of the army, while the battle in Al-Fiyah appears to be for control of a key bridge which is currently in the hands of the RSF. The fighting has left people terrified, forcing them to hide in their homes. But many people are still hopeful that the talks in Saudi Arabia, the first between the warring sides, would lead to a ceasefire, even though an unnamed Saudi diplomat has told AFP news agency no major progress has been made so far. Meanwhile, the army has detained two pro-democracy activists in Bahri, accusing them of supporting the RSF. Their colleagues have demanded their immediate release, saying the allegations against them are false. Neighborhood resistance committees formed to campaign for democracy in Sudan have played a vital role in providing humanitarian aid to residents since the war broke out on April the 15th. Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and RSF Commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo had jointly staged a coup in 2021, but are now involved in a fight for power, dashing hopes of a transition to a civilian rule. And that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. The talks are ongoing on a possible ceasefire in Sudan, in Saudi Arabia. I think I already expressed my feelings on that, but maybe Saudi will be able to convince these two sides to stop the violence. If they're able to do that, then good for them, but I still hold my reservations as Saudi Arabia being a space for what do you call it, for this mediation, like the right venue for this mediation to take place. Saudi Arabia as a country, and also Saudi Arabia and its authorities, and Saudi Arabia with its interest in Sudan. I think that there's some conflict of interest there based on some factors from their history that perhaps it's not the most ideal place for these talks to take place. But if Saudi Arabia has taken on this role and they are able to convince both sides to calm down and agree to come to the negotiating table, then that is good. I think both sides are represented in these talks in Saudi Arabia, and these talks in Saudi Arabia, I think, are being supported by the US, if I'm not wrong. And I think the argument I was making here earlier in the morning show was for perhaps these other actors who are trying in mediating this process, that perhaps it would have been prudent for them to support the efforts that have been put forward by IGAD. I think that would have gone a long way in helping and in assisting in these talks. We just support one negotiation process so that we don't have all these fractions going on. Look at, we have the similar one in the DRC, don't we? We have one that has been supported by African Union, the one by Angolan President Lourenço Yao, between the president of DRC, Felix Tshisekedi, and Paul Kagame. I don't know how that has worked. And then we do have another one led here in Kenya by former President Uhuru Kenyatta, that the talks between the government of the DRC and the rebel groups. You see how that is working out. And then we do have all these fractions of talks. We do have Qatar, who now wants to be involved in these talks and has tried and get these leaders at least in one room. That has not been very successful, to try to get Paul Kagame and Felix Tshisekedi in one room and have them sit face to face and air out their issues and see how they can iron out some of the sticking issues there. That has not been possible. And of course, other actors who have been accusing Rwanda, leveling these allegations and all that. So when you have all these actors all trying to find a solution to one problem, then it becomes very It's just a cocktail of disaster, and you'll perhaps never see the end of it, and better results for that process. So I think experience has taught us that it is important we support one strong mediation process. All these countries and all these actors, we support one strong process. We back it up with the resources that are required and everything else, and the pressure that we need to put on these generals. And then we can see a successful process that does not have too many, players and noises and voices and interest. That is my opinion. That is what I said earlier, and that is what I'm repeating right now. But Saudi Arabia, just like the U.S., immediately this war broke out on the 15th. I think, was it on the 16th or 17th? Just a few days later, or hours later, the U.S. went ahead and set up a special committee to look into the conflict in Sudan and all that. And I think I raised issues with that, not because it was a bad thing, but I just wondered what was the interest of the United States in Sudan. Okay? Because we have so many conflicts in this continent and across the world. I've not seen the U.S. set up a special committee to look into those conflicts and to try and solve those conflicts. I've not seen. It will issue of statements. It will warn the warring sides. It will do that. The U.S. Is active like that in the international system, and it's concerned all over. It does speak, but it does not. It has never come to a space where it has to form a special committee to look into a conflict. So the fact that it was able to do that for the Sudan's conflict, I think for me, immediately that pointed to perhaps a very heavy vested interest of the U.S. in Sudan. And just dating back to a warning they gave on Sudan last year, if Sudan was to go ahead and have this agreement, complete this agreement and allow for Russia to come and build an army base, a military base in Sudan, I think the U.S. warned Sudan that there will be some ramifications over that move. But I'll leave that there for right now, okay? So there is vested interest, and that's why I am wary that these talks are taking place in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is working with the U.S., and Saudi Arabia also has its own history in the latest political dynamics in Sudan since the protests started, and even before that removed President Omar al-Bashir. The part that Saudi Arabia played during that and the ousting of Omar al-Bashir, and now how it related post the coup that removed Omar al-Bashir, and how it has related with these two sides. So I think it's not the most ideal place for these talks to take place. But if Saudi Arabia can convince these two generals right now to put the arms down and to cease fire for the interest of protecting the innocent lives of Sudan, if that can do it, then I guess let's wait and see. But there is an official from the Saudi Arabia side, one of the diplomats there, who spoke on a condition of anonymity. And he said that the talks have hit, there's no major progress. This started, I think, on Saturday. So, but many people are still hopeful that talks in Saudi Arabia, the first between the warring sides, would lead to ceasefire, even though an unnamed Saudi diplomat has told the AFP news agency that no major progress has been made so far. Okay, so I think it's a deadlock there. So I guess they're trying to work on it, even as the rest of the players are trying to work on it. IGAD is really, I'm still rooting for IGAD to take lead in this process, even as I root for other players to support the IGAD process. But IGAD is just failing to show leadership. Since the appointment of these three heads of state from Kenya, Djibouti, South Sudan, nothing else has happened. Last week there wasn't much to report about. I was hoping over the weekend maybe something happened. So are these other processes sabotaging the process that was supposed to be spearheaded by IGAD? Have they maybe discouraged the IGAD leadership from pursuing this mediation, or what is really happening? Have they hijacked this process from IGAD? I would have loved IGAD to take on this process and for the rest of the actors to support them. But IGAD and how it has been working ever since the naming of this mediation team, these three heads of state, there's nothing much to report about. And I am disappointed. And I was really banking on this process that is led by IGAD, but I'm really disappointed. And, there are some factors, they wanted to fly into, of course, Sudan. That was not possible because at that time, it was not safe for these heads of state to go there. So I do understand. So at some point, I thought these talks were supposed to happen in South Sudan. Then that was not to be. The South Sudanese president, I think, wrote a letter on behalf of IGAD and invited these sides, and I think the army at that time agreed it will come and attend these talks, but the paramilitary RSF was not keen on attending these talks. So I think now the last time I was telling you about this, they were still arguing about the, the venue. There's no progress, and this is very disappointing because this is something that the regional leaders could have. This regional body should have taken charge and just led this process. So I'm expressing my disappointment on the IGAD team. I really am. But I do understand there are some challenges that perhaps have stalled you the speedy taking over of this process, but still, I don't know. Just issuing this press releases and all that is not helping. Well, you have people dying. Okay, now this story about this Nigerian he was a senator, and he represented, I think he was a member of parliament in Nigeria. And let me see if I can get that. And he's been leading that constituency since 2003. He represented the Enugu West constituency in southwest Nigeria for the opposition People's Democratic Party since 2003. But this year's election, he was not able to run because he was in police custody in the UK. And on Thursday last week, as we waited for the ruling on Friday, I was expressing my feelings about this story, and I was agitated by the fact that the parliament speaker in Nigeria and the leadership of ECOWAS had written to the UK court to ask the UK court to have clemency on this man, who and his wife and another doctor had committed the most heinous act ever, having a poor person, young person from Nigeria, lying to this person that they're going to get a job in the UK. And in the process, they had a plan to go harvest his kidney. That is a serious, serious offense. And I'm happy that the UK, I know we were having a joke, conversation over this matter on Friday when this ruling came out. And I shared it with a friend of mine, and the response was, and how could he not think that the UK was not the right place to go do these kinds of activities? Because as much as the UK, all these things, but when it comes to the institutions, they're very, very, they have strong institutions, and the judiciary really is alive to some of these things. So and the police there and all this. So for you to have thought that you're going to do an illegal organ harvesting in the UK, surely you should have thought through. You should have done it in Nigeria. Maybe, I don't know, bring your unscrupulous doctor to Nigeria and have that operation done there and harvest. That would not have made it, easy. Perhaps it would have been easier in Nigeria, buy a few people, for their silence and all that. But for you to take a whole person, organize for his travels, lie to him, and take him to the UK, as if you did not know that the authorities there will be usually on radar, especially the people who are going there for visits or whatever it is. And so they took this young man to the UK. Their daughter is having a problem with the kidney, and so she's been going through dialysis. In March, the courts freed her. I don't, from the story, she did not know those are the plans that the parents were having, to have someone else donate their kidney in a way that was not in accordance with the law. She was not aware of that, okay? But I guess they're just parents who are just trying to do the best for their child. But I think there are processes and there are ways, and people normally donate their kidneys in it's not, I mean, people do that. It is something that people do, but it has to be done in accordance with the law. And according to the UK laws, donations of these organs should not have any financial reward. So this man was to be paid, and then after they tested him, and I think he was not matching. I don't know. This story is just complicated, but the fact that they thought they were going to do this for this man, I think he learned about that after he got to the UK, and he did not have a way to escape until they tested him, and he realized he was not a perfect match, and so after suffering for 3 days, he decided to take himself to the police, and now this is the result. So I think this should be a great lesson to some people out there that money and position cannot buy you some of these things. And the fact that the Speaker of Nigerian Parliament even thought, asked for clemency, and ECOWAS, a whole body, getting itself involved in such a thing. I think that was shameful. And we should be, why are you not vocal about the young people who are dying in the Mediterranean, who are being mistreated in Tunisia and Libya and other countries on their way to the Mediterranean? I have not heard you, talk about that. I have not heard you vocalize that. These are the things that these economic blocs and these regional bodies are supposed to be talking so strongly about, and other issues affecting the member states there, but they don't. But on a personal issue, that this senator and his wife decided to commit a crime that is on a personal level, and you have a whole ECOWAS bloc writing to the UK government, and a whole Speaker of the National Assembly of Nigeria writing to the UK court to allow this person to be released and overlooking his crime. I think that was just offensive. That was just offensive and unnecessary. And I think even if you have to speak on behalf of somebody, there are certain issues you don't involve yourself in. Like this one was a personal criminal activity that he and his wife were involved in. So you should have stayed out of it. The Speaker of Nigerian Assembly and also the ECOWAS bloc. I think it is a shame that you could write and say that. Why don't you write to the UK court to stop bringing immigrants to Rwanda? Write and do that. Like, there are things you're supposed to be writing and vocalizing your voices about, but you don't. So that was a shame. And the UK, that is a country that has very strong institutions, and so you cannot go there and expect to get away with certain things. So I hope that is a lesson to some people out there. I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for watching. I'm Miriam Agutu. Bye-bye.